All right, let's get started with another session. I did in the prior tutorial show an animation of a galaxy and then work with it. It was rendered against background pink, and we used the magic pink mode to layer it or combine it with another static image in the background or with another animation even. And I wanted to actually get back in space and time, so to speak, and go actually show how I created that galaxy in the first place. So what we'll do is we'll go to let's go to black background this time. We don't necessarily need to do that on pink background, especially if we don't quite know yet what we're doing or why we're doing this. Let's just go with black. So I switch the background here to black and click erase, or you could right click on this erase tool and select clear selected to black, even if your background color is, or your alternate color is not black. And one thing we'll do is we'll create a placeholder for an animation, because when we create this galaxy, we want it to not just look good, but also to spin or animate. So we'll go to create under the animation menu, and let's say we want something that's about 5 seconds long at 30 frames per second. Let's make let's make it even longer, 7 seconds. There, 210 frames. Right, and we need 532 megabytes for that. Plenty enough on this system. Windows 32-bit can only address about 2 gigs. I have 16 gigs here. It's a shame, but I can't use it all. But it's good. We can do a 7-second animation and let it spin at this image resolution anyway. So what I'll do is I'll go into this tool called the particle modeler. And that's a tool that you use to create clouds. Let's go under the animated category. And so that's something you cannot do with PD Artist. You do need PD Howler for that. Because that menu, the animated menu, is only in the Howler edition. And here we go to Particle Modeler. And the Particle Modeler goes full screen. Now, since I was not recording full screen, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And somebody deleted the most recent build. I guess Dan is putting a new version up there. We have updates on PD Particle coming soon, Particle 9. But let's focus on this here, the particle modeler. Well, what a coincidence. Not related to the two, but still. So what we have here is the particle modeler, and you can add a sphere, and there it is. And what we'll do is we'll create 2 spheres. One which is going to be the flat disk of the galaxy, and one that's a little bit more of a spherical center here. So you can go to scale and go from the middle up or down, and same thing here in this direction. And same thing here. So that's one, and then we can add another sphere, and this one we will make more like sideways, make it bigger, but then also make it smaller, sort of flatter. And you notice that we get a preview here, but we're not quite done yet. So now if you click here to get ready to render, it's showing you what you got already, and well, it's not quite ready yet. So we need to unfreeze that. We can't actually unstep. We cannot step back in time like undo. We could go and select this entire thing and unfreeze it. The problem is that the entire parts, all of these clouds are going to be unfrozen. So when we do this, we don't have the separate spheres anymore. So we really need to do this all over again. Not too bad. We only lost about 1 minute here. So let's go and create a new item here. Let's create add a sphere, and this one will be kind of spherical. Surprise, surprise. And then maybe we'll move it up a little bit. There you go. And then we'll create this other sphere, and this one we need to have flatter. So let's go back to the scale tool and flatten it. And then in this view here we can go like that. In this view we can go like that. And actually this one here is the one where we need to make it big. So let's see if we have kind of a spherical disk, or elliptical or something like that. Let's go move it kind of over there, and here we can see the red the inner part of the galactic disk, so to speak. Let's scale it down even more, a little bit flatter, and sideways as well, make it bigger, something like this. And I think here it's too big, we can't see the outer rim, so we'll zoom out a little bit here with the zoom. Click that a few times and everything will zoom out. Then we can go back to move this kind of center, and here, keep it in the center here. So we should have, if we get ready to render, we should have a nice little flat galactic disk, and the Milky Way, and then sort of a globular cluster in the middle. Now, one more thing we want to do is have some arms, some spiral arms, and they don't necessarily have to really be spiraling out, like curving around like that yet. There will be something in the animation module that we do to make that happen, but we could also give it already some sort of a basic shape or form. But at the least, what you want to do is get some sort of spikes or spokes going out from the center to the outside. So what we'll do is we'll paint those with the airbrush mode, and we'll have them go like that. Let's say go along this axis from the center. So we'll go something like this. And again, if we prefer, what we could do is curve it up a little bit. So the next one I'm going to actually do a little bit like this, and then another one here, another one here, here, and something like that. All right. So let's get ready to render that. So here's our starting point for a galaxy. And I know there's a lot of other ways we could make this initially. For instance, one thing we could do in the middle is perhaps more of an additional very soft halo. So we might want to actually do some more airbrushing that's a little bit bigger, something like this size. But also the density and the size, minimum and maximum, these clusters are randomly spread within this size and this size. And so we might want to have them a little bit bigger on average, let's say 44 to, I don't know, 99 or 88, but then also less on the density. So perhaps instead of 0.01, we'll give it 0.002 or 3. So it makes it much more transparent. And then here, instead of 0.25, we'll give it 0.09 or 08 or something like that. So if you draw something here, it looks like it's taking over. But as you render that, or get ready to render, it's going to be very soft. It's going to be very subtle, very low density. And that's really what brings some nice, interesting detail into this. Having a mix of some small clusters, globular clusters that are high density, and then a mix with that of very wild and highly transparent parts to that. Alright, so that's essentially what we need. And one thing I would recommend also is that you save this. You can go click here and save it wherever you want. Typically that should be probably in, well, it could be in a folder where you have your projects. I'm not going to save it here today, but you can do that, and you should, because you may want to get back to this later, so you can open an existing saved CLD file, which is a cloud file. So that's about it. There is copy, paste, and other options here. There's some constraints you can put in, and there are also lighting effects here. You can change with light 1 selected. You can go and change the lighting intensity or the amount of ambient light, and so that will give you a very different effect here. Some self-shading. Then you can also click here to set the color of the light. Here's a light source number 2, which you can have come in. And as you're rotating now, you're rotating the light source as opposed to rotating the cloud, right? Or you say, let's set the cloud parameters, and now you're rotating the cloud. So you can work with this to create an interesting appearance where you know the light is hitting it from the top, or actually not so much from the top, more from the inside, kind of a self glow, and all sorts of similar parameters there, and a few more to experiment with. Alright, that said, we're now going to go and animate that. Now this is a pretty big cloud. I'm going to first of all make it a little bit smaller, and actually render preview, I'm going to turn that off so that I can go a little bit faster. This is a little bit more interactive for me. With the left button I can move it in and out, and I'm actually moving the object, not the camera. You can see here that you can edit the cloud, so that's moving the cloud, but you can also move the camera, and that looks similar, but it's not the same thing. Actually, I need to really select that, and then you see the camera moving, right? So you have also the light you can change. Now when you use that, you probably want to really see it in shaded mode. So make sure it's not too close, so it doesn't take forever to render, because these are a lot of particles to render. And then you can go to render preview, and so at this time, if you change the sunlight, edit the sunlight, you'll see different positions for the light here. You can click this one and that makes the other one. So we have two lights here, and you can click one and drag it around, or use the right button to change its position more on the upside. So you could, for instance, have that light come in into the middle, so that it kind of mimics most of the light, like coming from the galaxy core. But then, of course, there's a lot of other things too. Let's go back to the cloud itself. Let's select the cloud. And what we want to do is not change the position of it, but rather the angle. So let's see rotate. And you see here that we're doing a rotation. So what I'm going to do is actually do a rotation over time along the animation. Right, so we have a timeline down here at the bottom. And we need to make sure we go to the first frame and keyframe that. Right here, create a key. and then over time we can change it. For instance, here let's go and use the right button maybe. No, that's not the right rotation. Left button, moving it sideways. Yeah, let's go rotate it this way. Right? And then keyframe that. And then go even further. And right button still. No, left button. There you go, rotate it even more. And then even more. And then here is kind of where we're going to stop. So I'm going to go perhaps a little bit more, and that's it. Now I'm not going to go to the very end. I am going to go there, but I'm going to keyframe without any further changes, because one thing I want to do is I want to see, as I'm cycling through that, I want to enable some additional controls here. There is a secondary motion, and what that does is it creates a lag as things are turning around. They're not all turning at the same time. You'll see the center part will turn first, and so as we're doing this, you see how the center is rotating, and then gradually there's a lag, and the outer parts are coming with it. And you're actually starting to shape the galaxy even more into a spiral shape with that. Now, once you reach the end here, the middle is no longer moving, and the outer part is still kind of shooting over and eventually catching up. So that's the idea with this, is that you can create kind of interesting shapes with the galactic core turning at a different speed than the outer parts. And granted, these clouds I have here, or these trails, those spiral arms, are not quite as impressive, not as good as the ones I did earlier in the other demo. But that's okay. This is just a very quick one. We probably want to play with that a little bit. So I'm going to turn the grid off, and I'm going to also add the displacement field, because the displacement field can add, let's see. So what we're going to do is now simply render that. Oh, before we render it, there's also a displacement field we can use here, and we do have some detailed descriptions of what to do, what these parameters do. You can play with how long the laziness is here, how long it takes before it catches up as you have the secondary motion. We also have just alive. If nothing moves, if the camera doesn't move, if the object doesn't move, the parts, the clouds themselves still are going to do a little wiggle dance. And then you can also change the backlight or some other things here, like the inner light, to make it a little bit more glowing. So you have some additional controls. But I'm just going to render that now and see what that does. Right? So that can take a little while, but it's worth the wait. And and essentially you'll have that initial galactic movement. And the trick really in the end is to see what else can you do to make it even more interesting. So there's first things you'll want to do is store it, and then make it perhaps make that stored copy also the animated swap, and then combine that with a little bit of self-displacement, do some ghosting, do some blurring, motion blur, all sorts of, or light diffusion. So there's a couple of filters across the filters menu that you'll find really useful to give it an even more mystic appearance. So anyway, that's that for this very quick tutorial on the very basic galactic shapes you can create with that. And I'll wait for this to render. I'm not going to waste your time on capturing that though. So I'll just show you one or two finished examples with additional post in a few cases. Alright, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. black initially, and make an animation of, let's make it a little bit bigger, let's make it, or longer rather, let's make it 90 frames. So at 30 frames a second, that should play in about 3 seconds. And then I'm going to go to create something interesting with the animation filter, the animated filter called the particle modeler. And we've seen this one before. It's a tool to create clouds, and we'll just try to create something somewhat interesting looking, and then we can create a little rotation for it. So I wanted to show, for instance, we can select different ways to create a cloud. One is to add a sphere, and here it is, add another sphere, here's another one. Interesting, but not exactly terrific. So, well, it could be useful. But what I'll do is something a little bit different. I'll add to that. I'll go to the airbrush and put a little dab here or there. And then I'll add some changes to the minimum size or maximum size. So I'll make some smaller ones here first. I'll say minimum size 3, maximum size 22. So the effect here is going to be a little bit different from what we had before. You see tiny little bits of clouds. Get them ready for rendering, and there we got this. Perhaps we can add a few more in this view, and so on. So we got this pretty nicely put together, and then we'll do something in the other direction. We'll go really large. We'll go 99 on the maximum size, minimum size 66, and then also the density, however, we'll reduce the density to go, let's go insert the 0. Actually, let's make this 0.002, so much less density, and give it less also on the maximum density. Let's not go that high on the density, so 0.5 or 7, and then create some more blobs there and make them actually a little bit larger this time. All right, so we have some bigger halo around it. See how this is kind of a fluffy, I don't know, very, very windy looking cloud noise or pattern around it now. And the whole thing kind of lends itself to feeling like there's a bit of a mix of particles and smoke and air and who knows what else. So what we'll do is we'll go to the animation side now, click on animate, and perhaps undo the preview so we are a little bit faster. And you can be in the preview, but that can take a toll on your system, on the graphics. So it's a little bit faster if you don't do the preview quite yet, unless you have a really high-end graphics card, and I'm sure you probably do. I'm going to get rid of the grid. It's not going to be used during rendering. It's really something we can just use here as a reference during the initial preview. And you could do this again and again, so you could actually keep the existing frames or start over with new frames. So you could clear the frames. You could say, no, let's keep what we currently have and keep rendering. You can do different series, a sequence of animations over time. Now at the bottom here you'll see the timeline. Let's make sure we're on the left side here with the first frame, and what we'll simply do is a little bit of a rotation of this whole thing. Right, so we'll do let's go up here in the upper right. By default we are in the move mode, or move or translate. So left button lets you move it around and closer, right button moves it up and down as well. Whereas this one here, the rotation, the rotate will, well, surprise surprise, it rotates. And so what we'll do is we'll give it something interesting and then just do a little bit of a rotation horizontally, mostly horizontal. So let's do something like this and keyframe that. That would be on the right side here, and then go to the very end, and actually maybe not to the very end, maybe something like this, and leave a few more, like let's do 2/3 of it here, and then we'll leave it another for the last one. So keyframe, I may set the position there and then give it about almost a full or 180-degree rotation, keyframe that, and then just leave it there, go to the last position, keyframe it, so let's not make it move. And if you do a quick preview render here, you can see actually as you scrub through that now what it is you have prepared for the animation. And what we'll do with that is perhaps add a few more effects. There is a secondary motion, and so this rotation will cause sort of a delay. See how the inner part is turning first, this little rotation, and then the outer part is kind of following with a lag. And then when we stop, the inner part has come to a stop, but the outer part is still moving, and it takes a certain number of frames before it reaches that final position as well. How many frames? You can see that here. That's the laziness. So with the laziness, you can set how quickly you want to get there, right? Just 4 or 5. It will have a little delay, but it will very soon have caught up, right? And then here, the inner part is already stuck here. If you look around, here is the last frame where the inner part is moving, and it takes only a few more frames, like I said, about 5 or so, until the outer parts have caught up, and then you actually have a few more that are just not showing much more movement at all. So that's good if you want it a little bit more responsive. If on the other hand you want it to be delayed even more, give it like 20 or so, and then you have an inner part that starts moving, and the outer part is really not thinking about it for quite a while. This, by the way, can create some interesting galaxies or some rotating cloud patterns. On the other hand, you need a few more frames at the end if you want to actually see it come to a final position as well on the outer rims here. This one does not, right? Not enough time to actually get there. So I'm going to go back to perhaps about 7 or 8 or so frames needed. Then I'll look at the displacement field. That one will cause the pattern, the shape of the clouds to kind of move around. You can see around here they're doing a little bit of a dance. They seem to be moving down and up, and there's a little bit of a bumpiness in its behavior, and so there's some displacement happening here. And then there's also just alive, which is well, it's just alive, it just leaves. You'll see that during the render perhaps more, especially at the end when it's finally come to final position, and you would think it has reached a resting place where nothing should move anymore, and it will actually still move because it is still alive. It's like giving it a little bit of a breathing behavior. And then of course other things we could do here is add a little bit of lighting, like change the backlight. I think you might want to even keyframe some of that. The inner light, there's an inner light you can have. You can change the color of some of these. You can actually change the angle also, edit the sunlight. So if you are on the first frame and you're going to rotate or move, you're not moving the object right now, you're moving the light source or the camera or the object. So there's different things you can change. You can edit the cloud, and that would be the default behavior, although right now I'm not doing that anymore. You can edit the camera, you can edit the lights, and so on. So I'm going to refrain from making any more changes here. I think I have a nice little spinning motion that comes to a resting position at the end. Let's go render that. Let's go click here, render, and go.